Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This audio uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today we're diving deep into Homer's The Odyssey. It's this epic poem that follows Odysseus. He's trying to get home after the Trojan War, but that trip ends up taking 10 years. We'll also get into the stories of his wife Penelope and their son Telemachus back in Ithaca.
A story told over centuries, and we're looking at Emily Wilson's translation, which uses more contemporary language to make it really accessible for modern readers.
Yeah, and the poem itself, it's structured in these little episodes, almost like a series of interconnected adventures. What stands out to you about this way of storytelling?
Well, it throws us into a world that's both familiar and strange. Odysseus encounters giants and sorceresses, but also deals with very human emotions, grief, longing, and that deep desire to be recognized. This blend is what makes the poem so enduring. It's a timeless tale, woven into a framework of mythology and adventure.
Right, Dan. And it's not all monsters and gods. We see a huge emphasis on hospitality, a key value in ancient Greek society.
Right. And the poem uses that to draw a contrast between characters like Nestor and Menelaus, who offer genuine hospitality, and those like the Cyclops Polyphemus, who represent a complete lack of it. It's a marker of their character. How they treat guests reflects their adherence to social norms.
It's almost like eating together, sharing food. Becomes a way of separating the civilized from the uncivilized. And then, of course, there are the gods, always lurking in the background.
They're not just in the background. They're actively pulling Odysseus in different directions. We see the tension between Athena, who wants to help Odysseus, and Poseidon, who's doing everything he can to make his life miserable. It brings up some big questions about fate versus free will and whether we're really in control of our destinies.
Okay, so we've got these divine forces at play. But what surprised me was the amount of power held by the female characters, both the goddesses and the mortals. It's not something you'd necessarily expect in an ancient epic poem.
It's true. Think about Penelope. She's not passively waiting for her husband to return. She's actively using her intelligence and cunning to keep those suitors at bay and maintain control of her household.
She's not alone either. We have Athena, obviously, but also Helen of Troy and the sorceress Circe. They're all defying traditional gender roles in some way.
And that's one of the things that makes the Odyssey still relevant today, right? It pushes us to think about those power dynamics and how women are portrayed in literature, even literature from thousands of years ago. We also see this fascinating use of dog imagery, particularly when describing certain women. It's almost like a secret code, a way of understanding those power dynamics a bit deeper.
Yeah, it's not always meant negatively either. Sometimes it points to loyalty, persistence, even an ability to see through all the trickery and deception.
It reminds us to always be critical of the language we see in literature, especially when it comes to symbolism. It's about thinking about the context and how word choices reflect the world in which the story was written.
And then there's that major turning point, when Odysseus chooses to leave Calypso and return to Penelope.
That's where we see the themes of home and human desire really come into focus. He's choosing between a life of immortality with a goddess and a mortal life that's rooted in love, family, and belonging.
It's fascinating to compare this choice to Achilles in the Iliad. Achilles chooses glory over a long life. It's almost like Odysseus is making a counter-argument of what it means to be human.
It's a question of what truly matters, isn't it? He's choosing the sacrifices we're willing to make for love, family, and a sense of purpose.
And that choice leads him back to Ithaca, where he's recognized by different people in different ways.
Each of those recognition scenes peels back another layer of Odysseus. We see how he's perceived by those who knew him before the war, and we start to understand the different parts of his personality and his relationships. Even his name, Odysseus, is connected to hostility and dislike. It makes you wonder how much our names and our past shape who we become and how others see us.
And speaking of shaping perceptions, we have to talk about Emily Wilson's translation and how she's intentionally using modern language to help us connect with this ancient text. What does that do for you as a reader?
It strips away the feeling that this is some stuffy ancient work and lets us experience the raw emotion of the story. It emphasizes how relevant these themes still are.
It's like she's inviting us to rediscover the Odyssey as a living, breathing work of art, rather than just a dusty old relic from the past.
And that's what makes a classic. A classic, it's always relevant, always waiting to be rediscovered.
We've covered a lot here, but there's still so much to unpack in the Odyssey. What really resonated with you as we went through all this? What's sticking with you?
One thing that stays with me is how Odysseus' journey It becomes this process of self-discovery. It's not just about the physical obstacles he faces, but about how he changes on the inside.
Right, he's been through a lot. The Trojan War, years away from home. It's almost like he has to rebuild himself from scratch.
Yeah, and we see that play out in how people recognize him, or don't recognize him. Sometimes he's disguised, sometimes he's incredibly vulnerable, and sometimes even he doesn't seem to know who he is anymore, like that scene with his old dog Argos.
Oh, that one gets me every time. Even though Argos is old and weak, he's the only one who truly recognizes Odysseus. Just by his scent. It says so much about those deep bonds of loyalty and the power of recognition.
Yeah, it's a powerful contrast to how many others fail to see him for who he is. And then there's Odysseus' choice to hide his identity from Penelope when he finally gets back to Ithaca.
It seems harsh, but I get why he does it. He's been gone for so long, and he needs to make sure she's still the woman he remembers, that her loyalty hasn't wavered.
It's also about power dynamics. He's lost his status, his authority, during his travels. He has to reclaim it, to prove that he's still the rightful king.
So he's not just returning home, he's having to re-earn his place in it.
Exactly. And that leads us to the big showdown with the suitors. That tension builds and builds, and then it explodes in this incredibly violent scene.
Yeah, it's satisfying to see him take back what's his, but there's also something unsettling about the level of violence.
The poem doesn't shy away from that. It asks us to confront those difficult questions about justice, revenge, and whether violence can ever truly lead to peace. It's about the cyclical nature of it all, how one act of violence can trigger another.
Right, and then we have that moment everyone's been waiting for, the reunion with Penelope.
After all this time, after all waiting and uncertainty, they finally come face to face.
But even then, there's hesitation. Penelope's been deceived before. She needs absolute proof that this man is truly her husband.
That's where the test of the olive tree bed comes in. It's brilliant, a testament to their bond, and the deep, intimate knowledge they share. Only they would know the secret of that bed.
It proves that true love can endure anything, even years of separation and unimaginable hardship.
Emily Wilson's translation really captures the rawness of that reunion. You can feel the weight of everything they've been through in her choice of words.
It's a reminder that the Odyssey isn't just about adventure. It's about love, loss, and the incredible resilience of the human spirit, and about how we find our way back to ourselves after being lost for so long.
It brings us back to that idea of homecoming, which goes beyond just the physical place. It's about finding your way back to who you are, to what matters most.
We've explored these intricate layers of the Odyssey, the power of hospitality, the influence of the gods, the captivating roles of female characters, and even the subtle messages in the language itself. What aspects of the poem would you say have impacted you the most during this deep dive?
It really is incredible how even after spending all this time with the Odyssey, I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. There's always something new to discover in this poem.
I know, it's amazing. Why do you think this story, why do you think it's resonated with people for thousands of years? What makes it so timeless?
I think it's because, at its core, the Odyssey is about universal human experiences, that longing for home, that need for connection, the struggle to overcome adversity. Those are things everyone can relate to, no matter what time period or culture they come from.
Yeah. And it explores those themes within this incredibly rich world of mythology and adventure.
We have gods and monsters and shipwrecks and battles, but also quiet moments of reflection, deep sorrow, and joyful reunions. It's a story that embraces the whole spectrum of human emotion.
And it makes us think critically about the stories we tell ourselves, about the values we hold dear. The role of women, for example, is something that still sparks debate and different interpretations.
Absolutely. It challenges us to rethink traditional gender roles and to appreciate the complexity of these female characters. And then there's the question of Odysseus himself. Is he a hero, a villain, or something in between?
He's definitely not your typical hero. He's cunning and resourceful and deeply devoted to his family, but also capable of violence and deception.
Right. It's that complexity that makes him so fascinating. He's a flawed human being trying to find his way in a world that's both beautiful and dangerous. And that's ultimately what makes the Odyssey such a powerful and enduring work of art. It reflects the human condition in all its messy glory.
Absolutely. And if you haven't read the Odyssey, or if it's been a while, I can't recommend Emily Wilson's translation enough. It's a fresh and engaging way to experience this classic tale. You can find a link to purchase the book in the show notes. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives like this one. Until next time, keep those minds mindful.